This is going to be the best financial analysis class you've ever taken in real estate because we are going to build together this whole financial model from scratch that I use to build Virginia's #1 vacation getaway, Royal Oak Retreat. Understanding your numbers comes before any of this. Before you can make any investment in real estate, you have to understand the numbers. And essentially, understanding the numbers is 1/3 of being a real estate developer. Because once you understand how to run the numbers, the only two things left to do is find the correct assumptions to put inside of your financial model and then turn your financial model, turn your financial model into reality, which is actually raising the capital and spending all the money to make this investment. So we're gonna go from a blank sheet and we're gonna end up with this exact financial model. There are some interesting formulas in here and we're gonna go through every single step. I think I covered everything on my agenda. Yeah, so one quick disclaimer is that AI is eventually going to be AI can already build a financial model, but what it can't do is explain to you how numbers flow in real estate, which is exactly what building this financial model will teach you. Once you do it from scratch one time, it will actually change your life. It's like learning a new language, and you're gonna approach real estate completely different after you understand this process. So what you're gonna need to open up Excel, open up this video in a different tab. Ideally, you have two monitors, so you have this video on one tab, and then you have a blank Excel screen on a Windows computer, because all the shortcuts that we do, we're gonna build this whole financial model without using our touchpad. All of it's gonna be shortcuts because that's how real financial analysts do it. Hey, we're wearing our Patagucci today, going full finance bro on it. But yeah, so open up this video in a different tab, have a blank Excel worksheet open in your Windows laptop, because all the shortcuts that I'm gonna be discussing are done through Windows. The Mac shortcuts they just don't, one, I don't know them, but two, everyone that does financial analysis in real estate doesn't use Mac. So before anything else, we're going to need to go to Adventures in CRE, type this into your favorite web browser, click enter, and go to Supercharged Excel with Excel for commercial real estate. So you're gonna go through all the instructions to download this add-in, add it to your cart. It is completely free, and Adventures in CRE is the best place for all of your real estate financial modeling needs. They offer a course in financial underwriting for real estate, which I highly recommend. It's something that was recommended to me by a Harvard professor, and so very, very highly recommended. But everything that I'm going to teach you is from the things that I learned from this course. So if you have a thirst for more knowledge after you go through this entire process, you can go to Adventures in CRE to learn more. So I'm going to go through this process, and I'll see you when we install it. All right, so make sure you get that downloaded, and then once you got it downloaded, come back and join us to continue. So once you got it downloaded, you'll see for CRE here in the top right hand corner, and there are a bunch of shortcuts that we're going to be using from this that are only available if you have it downloaded. So go ahead and make sure you download it correctly before moving forward. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is now that we're building this model, we're going to navigate everything using our arrow keys. So first thing we're going to do is go to the left hand corner, click Control Space to select the whole row. Then we're going to click Alt, or the whole column. There we go. Control Space to select the whole column, Alt HOW to select the column width, then click 1, then click enter. Next thing we're going to do is going to select 6 columns up here. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we're gonna go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to click Alt HBS, and that's going to create a box just like that. Next thing we're gonna do is gonna select the top by just clicking Shift and then left arrow key. So we're on this cell, Shift left arrow key, select that whole area. Then we're gonna click Alt HH to open up the theme colors. Now, okay, these colors are actually okay. Then you're gonna click Shift left arrow, left arrow, left arrow all the way, or you can do Control Shift left arrow to select the whole thing. Let go of the control while still holding the Shift and move back one cell to just select that top part. And you're gonna click Alt HH, and then we're gonna make it this green color. There we go. And we're gonna call this the deal summary, but we're gonna bold the text, so we're gonna click Control B, and then we're gonna type out deal summary. There we go. Then we're going to type out the address here. This is the address of the property. Then we're going to do deal. Then we're going to need to know the acres. And then we're going to need to know the square. So we made one row too many. So we're going to click shift space, and then we're going to click control shift minus. Now that's going to get rid of that. And then we're going to reselect this whole area. So I'm going to hold control and shift, and then click the left arrow once and then the up arrow once. And that's going to select this whole area. So hold control shift, then left arrow, up arrow, and then we're going to let go of control, maintaining holding shift, and click the down arrow once to select all that. And then we're going to do the shortcut again to put the box around it, which is Alt HBS. And then we get it all right after that. Next thing we're going to need is we're going to be in cell E3, and we're going to type out the development budget. We're going to need to know the equity required, and we're going to need to know the hold period. And now to format this whole thing, we're going to click control space, and then we're going to select Alt HOI. That's going to automatically adjust the column width. And we're going to do that the same thing over here too. Alt HOI. All right, once we got that done, we'll do this. So these are all gonna be input cells, which means that we're gonna be inputting our own information to here, and these are gonna be output cells. So that's gonna be, we'll learn a little bit more about that as we continue, but we'll just select these cells and click Alt HH. So I don't like any of the color options that we have available, so we're gonna click Alt, we're gonna go P to go into page layout, and then we're gonna click TC for colors. And I like this old color scheme that we had in Office 2013 to 2020. So I'm going to select that. Then we're going to go back to Alt HH, and there we go. I like this light yellow color. So I'm going to copy that. All right, and now to bring that down, we're going to click Control C, go down, and then we're just going to copy the formatting. So you can just Control C, Control V, but we'll have to do this a little bit more often. And so I'm going to show you, we're going to click Alt H V and then R to copy the formatting. And you notice we lose this, so then we're going to just fill that in with Alt H B and then O for the bottom border. And then we see we got that back. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to put in a fake address. So 123 Las Vegas. Is Las Vegas Ave. There we go. So we need some more space there. Yeah, that's not working out for me. So we're going to click Alt HAL. There we go. So to change the direction that this text goes, we're going to click Alt HAR. That's going to change the direction of that. And then I want some more space. And so I'm also going to do Alt HOI. There we go. Now we have more space. Acres, we're going to put in 2.5, because that's what we have at Royal Oak Retreat. And then for square footage, we're just going to do 1,000. Now, since these are all input cells, and that's why we have this beige background, we're going to make all these cells blue. And now with our new shortcut, we just have to click Command-Shift-B, and that's a standard in financial modeling, is that all input cells are blue. And the color that we make our text is 00255. Which is like the industry standard for the color for input cells in real estate financial modeling. Interesting stuff. So there we go. We got that formatted. And we're going to go back to filling this out. So we're just going to highlight these cells yellow by clicking Control-Shift-Y to highlight these cells yellow. And we'll continue. So next thing we're going to do is our return summary. Now we can just copy a lot of this formatting. So I'm just going to hold Shift, click my left or my right arrow, select all this, copy, and then paste it. We're going to rename this return summary, and we're going to break this out into two different blocks. So the first thing is I'm going to click Shift Space to select all this, Control Shift plus plus to add more rows, and then we're going to select all this and delete it. And then I'm going to also get rid of all this formatting. So I'm going to click Alt H H N to get rid of the highlights. So we're going to make this our unlevered returns, which means our returns without leverage. Leverage is debt. And so we want to see our unlevered returns and we want to see our levered returns. And so our unlevered returns are going to be our yield on cost, and we're gonna see how that's all calculated. We're gonna wanna know our IRR, our equity multiple, and our profit. But we wanna see a couple more things. So again, shift space, control shift plus plus. We're gonna do our profit. I think we gave ourselves an extra one. So shift space and then control shift minus, or control minus to get rid of that. There we go. Then our levered returns. We have our cash on cash. We have our DSCR, our IRR, our equity multiple, and our profit. There we go. If you see me looking up, it's because I built this a while back. And so just kind of like looking up to see everything that we need for this financial model. So then I'm going to click shift, right arrow, right arrow, right arrow to select all this, then alt HH, and then we're going to select this white background right here. I think that's like a little too light. So alt HH, too dark, too dark. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That first one. Okay, now these are all returns that are going to get calculated later. So we're just going to select them, control shift Y, because we're going to be coming back to fill this out. There we go. Moving on, we're going to forecast our revenue. So I'm going to select this again. Again, shift control down arrow to select all of that, and then shift right arrow, boom, copy that. We'll call this revenue. Select all this, all HHN, and then delete all the text inside. So I want to add some dotted 2, 3, 4. So we're going to need another row in here. And then we're going to select all of this and add Alt HB. So anytime you want to go to borders, it's Alt HB. We're going to click M for more borders. And then we're going to select this dotted one. And we're going to put it on the bottom, the top. There we go. Just like that. And it's going to give us this like grid area. Then we're going to click Shift, select this whole area again, Alt HBS to give us that outside border. Boom. Then we go to, then these are where we're going to input our comps. So our comps are comparable properties that we're going to be building similar to. And we're going to average out about 3. So depending on the size of the project, sometimes you might average 3, sometimes you might average 5. But now that you guys know how to like add columns or take away columns with Control Shift plus or Control minus, you can add more comps if you want. So we'll just call this comp number 1, copy that down. Will give us 3 comps. And then in order to open up the text in this cell, I'm going to click F2. It's going to bring my cursor into the cell, and then I'm going to backspace, put 2, enter. F2, backspace, 3, enter. And then I'm going to select all of these and then Control Shift B because these are input cells. Eventually I'll have the name. So I'll name all of these comps. So I could call one Doa House, Shenandoah Yurt, or Ava Shenandoah, right? So I know which comp I'm talking about, but because we're making a template, we're just gonna call it comp 1, 2, 3. And then here we have total revenue. We're gonna bold that with Control B, and then we go over to the right. Now over here, we're gonna have our occupancy, and then we're gonna show our monthly revenue and our annual revenue. Now I want all this centered, so I'm gonna shift left arrow to select it all, and then to center it, I'm gonna click Alt H AC. That's gonna center my text. Now for our occupancy, this is all stuff that's gonna get inputted. And so for input cells, we're making it also have a background of that beige color. So I'm gonna Alt HH, give it that beige. And I'm gonna also give this the beige. And then in order to select these cells as well, I'm gonna select these 3 cells. I'm gonna hold Control, and then I'm gonna select with my cursor like that. Then Alt HH, select that, boom. And now since I'm also in these, I'm gonna select them again and make them blue. So Control Shift B to make them blue. Our occupancy is going, we'll just say 90%, but we need to format this to make it a percentage. So I'm gonna click Control Shift 5 to make it a percentage. There we go. Then I'm gonna copy this down. There we go. Then this annual number is what we're gonna be drawing from AirDNA. So we'll call this one 100,000. Again, this is an input cell, so it's blue. This one will be 120. This one would be 110. Now, I don't like that formatting, so I'm gonna select all of it, Control Shift A. There we go. All right, so I like the accounting with no decimals, and this is what we're gonna use for a lot of our stuff because we're gonna have cells that have a 0, and instead of it showing a 0, we want it just to show this dash. And then to go back, you just click Control Z or Control Y. There we go. And then moving forward, we're gonna wanna take the average. Well, first of all, I'm gonna center this, Alt HAC, and then I wanna take an average of this, so I click Alt equals. No, that's not what I'm gonna do. So to take an average, I click equals, average, tab to select it, and then I'm just gonna click my cursor arrow up, hold shift, and select all of these. Click enter, and now I got my average to center it, Alt HAC. Boom, moving forward. Over here, I'm also gonna take an average, but I can just copy this format. But if I just Control C and then, and then Control V, it's gonna get rid of my formatting right here, which isn't terrible, but it's good to get in the practice of just copying over the formatting. So I can Control C and then Alt H V F to copy just the formula. So now if you look up here, you can see the formula copied over, and it continued to select all 3 cells. All right. And then the last thing is we need to calculate this monthly revenue. So I'm just going to do equals, move my right arrow over, divide that by 12 to get our monthly. And then we want to have the same format. So I'm going to click Control Shift A to make it that format that we like. Control C, move it down, Alt H V F for the formula. Okay, but you see the formatting didn't copy. So we can select this, Alt H V, okay, values and source formatting, values. All right, so I thought that there would be an easier way. We'll just go down here, Alt H V F, and then we'll click Control Shift A. There we go, to make it that formatting we like. And then I'm gonna copy over the formula, Alt H V F, there we go, and then Control Shift A to get the average. Yep, that's right. And then I'm just clicking F2 to open up the formula. There we go. So that's looking good. Next thing we're going to do is our expenses. So after forecasting our revenue, we also want to do our expenses, and that just makes sense to do next. So select all this, Control C, Control V, select this, delete all the contents. You know what? Probably doesn't make sense to do all this, but whatever. I'm just gonna select everything. Alt H, B, N, Alt H, H, N, and then delete all that. All right, we're just going in circles, guys. All right, now this is what I'll do. I'll just type out expenses, and then we'll also do monthly to annual. Copy that over, Alt H, H, select that green that we like. And I'm going to center these two, Alt HAC, Alt HAC. There we go. And we're going to start with our utilities. So we're going to categorize these expenses somewhat. So utilities, water, gas, electric. We'll take care of the formatting later. Internet. Now we're going to move into our short-term rental specific expenses, which is our cleaning, our repairs and maintenance, supplies, software. Now we're going to move into our taxes and insurance, which we're breaking out because we have our sales tax, we have our occupancy tax, we have our property tax, and our insurance. Then I'm assuming that we're going to have some other expenses too that I'm not going to be able to think of completely on the spot. And so we're going to select, or we're going to give ourselves 3 additional expenses that, you know, if they don't fall into any of these categories, we can just add our own. So we'll call this other expense number 1. Copy that down. F2 to enter. F2. Call that 3, and then brings us to total expenses. All right, gonna select all of this, make it black. So I'm clicking Control Shift K to make it all black, and then Control B to unbold it. Now, some of these need to be bolded. We'll bold that. We're gonna underline and indent, or underline and italicize our headers. So utilities, that's just Control U, Control I. So Control U and I, there we go. Control U and I, Control U and I, and then Control U and I. There we go. We're gonna make these blue, Control Shift B, and we're going to select all of this, Alt HBS to give ourselves that boundary. And then we're gonna give ourselves that special dotted formatting here. So we're gonna do Alt HB M. That's incorrect. Alt HB M. We're gonna select that dotted line, top, middle, bottom. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to start at the top. So our water is billed monthly, and so we're gonna, so all of our utilities are essentially billed monthly. So we're gonna select all these, Alt HH, make it yellow, and then we're going to Control Shift A to make it that formatting we like, and then Control Shift B to make it an input cell. So our water, we'll call it $50 a month, gas, $50 a month, electric, $300 a month, and then internet, $150. I'm just throwing out numbers, guys. And then for this, it's just the monthly times 12, and we can copy this formula and formatting down. So that's Control C and Control V. Then we're gonna select this and then Control Shift K, because these are output cells. You know, they're calculated, while these are input cells. So moving forward, we have our short-term rental expenses. So a little bit of calculation goes into this. And so I kind of need these cells. So I'm going to Control Space and then Alt HOI to give myself these 3 cells to work with. Then over here, we're going to need our cleaning fee, our average stay duration, and then our turnovers per month. I'm gonna select all this, and then we're gonna make it smaller, italicized, and centered. So to do that, Alt H AC to center it, Alt H F K to make it smaller, and Control I to italicize it. There we go. So I'm gonna give myself a little more space here. So to make the column a little wider, Alt HOW, and then we'll make it 22. There we go. So our cleaning fee, we'll just call this 100. Essentially, we're trying to calculate here how much our monthly cleaning is gonna be. And so to do that, we need to know how much our fee is, on average, how long people are staying, and then how many turnovers we have per month. And so I'll show you how to do that. So our cleaning fee is essentially how much we pay each turnover. I'm gonna center this. Actually, I'll finish typing this out. Our average stay duration, this is some data that we're gonna take from AirDNA. And so in my market, it's 2.1. And so our turnovers per month, is calculated by taking the amount of days in a standard month, multiplying that by the average occupancy that we expect to have, and then dividing that by the average stay duration. And then I'm going to reduce the amount of decimals here. So I'm just going to do Control Shift A to get it into that formatting, and then Control Alt this, like here, I'm going to show you that key on your keyboard is the key that I'm using to add decimals while I'm holding Control and Alt. And then this is the one, essentially these are the 2 keys that I'm using to change the decimal. So holding Control Alt and then hitting those buttons to add or take away decimals. So 1 decimal is good. So that'll tell me how many turnovers I'm typically doing per month. So if my occupancy increases, I'll pick up more turnovers because there's more people at the property, right? So we can see how that's being calculated. And then if our stay duration, let's see, increases to 3, that's going to be less turnovers, which is going to impact how much we're spending on cleaning every month. So that's why we kind of want to have this be dynamic, but I'm already getting confused with which cells are inputs and which cells are outputs. So I'm going to select this. Well, first I'm going to copy this formatting and apply it over here. So Alt HV R for formatting. There we go. And then Alt HAC, Alt HAC. Oh, okay. So since it's accounting, I can't center it. So I'm just going to make it a standard number format. So to do that, Shift right, Control Shift M to make it a standard number, and then Alt HAC. There we can center it. Okay. So we're going to revert this back to 2.1. And I want to see that decimal, so Control Alt right arrow. There we go. And then our monthly cleaning expenses is the average amount of turnovers times the cleaning fee. And that's what we can expect to spend on cleaning every month. And we can get rid of the decimals here. There we go. And then the annual is just this times 12. We can also get rid of those numbers. I'm just going to copy that number formatting down, Alt HV. I'm just going to select that, all this, and make it the accounting formatting that we like. So that's just Control Shift A. Okay. So then these follow-on expenses are going to be very similar. So repairs and maintenance, supplies, software. We can just copy this down. I just Shift right arrow, Control C, went down, Control V. Repairs and maintenance. Again, all these numbers are going to be different for each deal. I'm just putting in placeholder numbers just to make sure all my formulas are working. Okay, and there we go. Next thing, taxes and insurance. So sales tax, occupancy tax. Yeah, sales tax and occupancy tax are taken as a percentage of your revenue. So the county or whoever taxes you, or the state, because this is state sales tax, taxes you based on your total revenue. So we need to create a formula for that. So we're going to call this percentage of revenue. I'm going to copy this formatting down. This is 5.3% in my area. And then we're doing Control Shift 5 to make it a percentage format, and then Control Alt right arrow to add a percentage point, and we'll add 2. We'll also make this text smaller. I want this centered, so Control Shift M to make it a standard number, and Control Alt right arrow to change that. And then I want all of this text smaller, so Alt H F K to make it smaller. There we go. Alt H F K to make that smaller. We can just copy that down. All right. And then we can assume our property tax is 5%. Our occupancy tax is 5%, because in my county that's what it is, but you're going to have to find out what your sales tax and occupancy tax are for your own counties. Then in order to calculate we'll do annual. We'll calculate our annual. This is equal to my total revenue, and I'm going to click F4 to lock this cell in place. Okay, F2 to enter back into it, and then multiply this by F2 to get out of it by this percentage right here. Now, instead of clicking the left arrow so many times, I can just hold Control and click my left navigator button to just jump to it if I'm holding Control. Then I click Enter, and there we have it calculating. And now, because I have that blue cell locked, I can just Control C and then Control V, and now this cell is being drawn down because it's unlocked, but my total revenue is sticking in place. There we go. And now our property tax is based on our assessed value from the county, and then our mill rate. And I'll go ahead and show you guys what that mill rate looks like. But right here, we'll type out assess value and then mill rate. I'll copy this formatting here, Alt HVR, beautiful, and then copy this from up here. Our assessed value, we'll just call it 400,000. Whoa, get rid of that decimal point. And then our mill rate, so I'll show you an example. Warren County, Virginia real estate tax rate. So here's how taxes are calculated. This rate per $100 of assessed value. So we're already getting taxed 56 0.9 cents for every $100 of assessed value. So in order to calculate that, what we're going to do equals this cell divided by 100, put that in parentheses, and then multiply that by the mill rate. And the mill rate is 0.569. I'm going to show all decimals there. And we can even show mill rate dollars per, I don't think that is too helpful. I think you guys get it. So there we go. This is, if we assess for this amount, and the mill rate in 2026 is this, it's going to change every year. This is how much we're going to pay in annual taxes. Then our insurance is just a quote that we're going to get from an insurance company, which makes it an input cell. And you see all these are output cells, so they're black, but this is an input cell. So we're going to Alt-H, give that beautiful yellow color, then Control-Shift-B to make it that input blue. And we're going to just call this 3,500. Boom. Now we can take our monthly, which is just the cell to the right divided by 12. Okay. And then our other expenses, I'm just going to make up numbers here. We'll have these expenses all be annual. But ultimately, you guys know how to calculate now. So if it is an input monthly, you guys can shift over which cells are the input. But we'll just call these all annual expenses. Control-Shift-V to give us our input blue. We'll call this 800, 240, and 120. You know, this could be like a landscaping contract that you pay monthly, or it could be, it could really be anything. Anything that isn't over here. And then we're just taking that divided by 12. Oh, Control-C, Control-V. I'm just clicking F2 to open up, make sure that it's calculating correctly. All right, there, we're done with our expenses. So last thing to do is just to sum up everything above. So I'm just clicking equals, typing out sum, hitting tab, and then clicking my up arrow, holding shift, holding control, and then clicking the up arrow. There we go. Click enter. There are all of our expenses. And then I can just copy this formula over to the left, Control-C, Alt-H-V-F to copy over that formula, then hitting F2 to make sure it's calculating correctly. There we go. That's our expenses. Last thing to do is just to bold our expenses, and we're good to go. I'll go up here and bold our total revenue as well. Make it look pretty. Moving on, we got to calculate our net operating income. So far we've covered revenue. These are all projections, right? You do this financial model before you spend a single dollar on the deal, just to make sure that your projected returns are in line with what you want to see based on the amount of risk you're going to take. And we'll get into showing what the appropriate returns look like for these types of deals later. But next thing to calculate is our net operating income. Net operating income, and this is just revenue minus expenses. Ooh, and this is blue, so Control-Shift-K to make that black. And then these two should also be black. Control-Shift-K. Yep, that should be net operating income. And I just click tab once it's popped up to autofill that. I'll unbold these top ones. We just want to have the bottoms be bold. There we go. And then moving on to the right, we can just take our revenue. Our revenue just equals this number right here, the average of all of our comps. Boom. Then our expenses equal the sum of all of our annual expenses, which we just calculated. And I can just Control-C and Control-V that to the left. And you can see this number is equal to this, and this number is equal to that. And if you want to see how the formulas are being traced, you can just click F2 and it opens it up. All right. Next thing to do is just to take the difference between the two. So net operating income equals revenue minus expenses. Then I can just copy that over. We're gonna underline this right here. So Control-U to underline that. And one thing I wanna know is my expense ratio. So that's what percentage my expenses are relative to my total income. So an expense ratio, well, I'll just show you how it's calculated, would just be this divided by this. So an expense ratio of 1 would be expenses are 100% of the total revenue. Expense ratio of 0.5, or we'll make this a percentage. And I done that by clicking Control-Shift-5. And I'm going to add some decimals, so Control-Alt right arrow. Excuse me. So an expense ratio of 0.5 would be my expenses are 50% of my revenue. Make sense? So I'm just going to change this, like say this were equal to 20% of my revenue, then my expense ratio is going to be 20%. You can see that. So I just Control Z to back into the actual number that it is. There we go. And I want the formatting for this to look a little bit different. So I'm going to click Control 1, and then I'm going to go over to number. I'm going to click custom, and then I'm going to click into this box right here. I'm going to go space, quotation marks. I'm going to type out expense ratio. Close the quotation marks, click enter. Now you can see that this number now has expense ratio right after it. But what I can do is I can still click into this cell, multiply it by 1, and it still functions as a number. It still functions as a number as compared to if I typed out 41.32% and then also added expense ratio, then it stops functioning as a number. And so that becomes helpful later down the line to be able to format numbers like that. So there we go. And then I can Alt HFK to make it smaller, Alt HFK to make it even smaller. I'm going to Control I to italicize it. There we go. I'm going to Control Shift left arrow up to select all of it, Alt HBS to give us that border. Select this top part, Alt HH, gives that beautiful green that we like. Boom, and then bold those bottom two cells, and we are done with net operating income. So the next thing, these are three things that we really need to assume well in our financial model. How much we're gonna earn, the revenue, the expenses, and then how much it's gonna cost to build. So that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna do the development budget. And we're gonna break this out into various things. So the first one is the land. Select all this. Well, first, we'll give us that green top border. Boom. Then we're gonna make this gray. Each header is gonna have its own, there we go. We're gonna copy that. We're gonna give ourselves, okay, and then this is gonna be our hard costs. This is gonna be our soft costs. And yeah, there we go. So for our land, we have our purchase price. And then there's various expenses that are associated with your purchase. So there's a lot of different expenses that come associated with the purchase price. It could be like the appraisal, you have your soil inspection, you could have a survey, you could have a deposit for the land that gets reimbursed to you at closing. And so there's a bunch of things that go into purchase price, but the one that we know for certain is the purchase price. And then we're gonna call these other ones land acquisition expense number 1. Alt HOI to give us more space, Control C, bring that down, and then F2 to enter in, subtract that out, F2, there we go, and we're gonna make all of these blue. So I think we're doing these beige cells. Since nothing is being calculated based off of this input, I'm not gonna give it that beige, because this beige is kind of indicating to me that the cell is impacting a number that will eventually flow to our returns. So since for here, I could type whatever I want and it won't impact my returns. But if I change the assessed value, that's gonna change my expenses, which is gonna flow to my NOI, which is ultimately gonna hit my returns. So I'll take this out, Alt HHN to get rid of the fill, because none of that is hitting the returns. It's not an input that's gonna impact the returns. I think similar to here, we might use this later, so I might get rid of that, but that's kind of a convention that I'm gonna follow here. So next thing is what this actually costs. So Alt HH, there we go. And ultimately this is all gonna flow down to our total development budget. So I'm gonna select all this, Alt HBM, give us that border on the top, middle, and bottom. Beautiful. Then we're gonna make these all the accounting formatting that we like. So that's Control Shift A. And then we're gonna put input numbers here. Oh, and then we also need to make this blue. So Control Shift B. And then there we go. Control Shift B. All right. So now our hard costs. So our hard costs are the money that we're gonna end up giving to a contractor. So typically you just have one contract that you'll give to one contractor. This will be the total contract value. So when you sign a construction contract with your builder, the total value of that contract is what you're gonna put into this cost. So we'll just call this I'll give you guys some extra space. So if you guys do have multiple contractors on your project, you could show how much the value of each contract is here. So we'll call this contract number 1, all HVF, nope, all HVR. There we go. And we copy all that formatting down. Beautiful. And we'll put some big numbers in here. So 300, then maybe this is like a landscaping contract and this is like a utility contract. There we go. So our soft costs are going to be extensive. There's going to be a lot of stuff here. So this first one is all of our permits and inspection fees. Now, I make it black and italicized, Control-Shift-K to make it black, and Control-I to make it indented, or sorry, italicized. So our permit inspection fees, our builder is likely going to pay, or I'm going to have it in my contract that my builder pays my permits. But there's going to be some permits that are outside of their scope, like my short-term rental permit or my short-term rental inspection, or maybe an inspection that I do before I hire my contractor, like my soil inspection when I do my land purchase, or maybe I design my septic system after I do my land purchase, and so I'm carrying some inspection fees over here. That's what I'm gonna put over here. They're typically small fees. For me, there was like 3 or 4 fees for short-term rentals that I had to pay out, and there was a permit fee to my property owners association. So that's kind of stuff that you want to carry in this area. So we'll call this permit inspection fee. There are so many ways that the government makes money off of construction, and so it's your job to do your due diligence to make sure that you know all the fees that you're going to have to pay on your project before you go into it. Then we're going to do, typically they're all, we'll call them all $500, but they're going to vary. I think the biggest one I paid was $2,500. I mean, that probably averages out to more like this. And I want to see this all in my accounting formatting that I like, but I'll end up just copying this formatting down. All HVR for formatting. And you can see by doing that, it doesn't change the numbers, it just changes the formatting. All right, and then I'll also underline this just to kind of make it stand out a little more. So I'll copy that. And next thing that we have in our soft costs is our design. So this could be the design of our cabin. This could be the design of our landscaping. This could be the design of our website. This could be the design of, maybe you have to hire a social media manager to design your Instagram page. That might fall under like miscellaneous, but everything design related we want to keep track of. So this might be your interior design if you hire an interior designer. So we'll show 3 here. And ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be like you typing out interior designer or landscape architect or architect. Blah, you see I misspelled. But that's kind of like how you guys should be using it. Right now, since each project is different, we're just showing design fee number 1. And if you need to add more permit and inspection fees, you can just Control-Shift-Space, Control-Shift-Plus, and then add in your extra design fee or permit and inspection fee. Then over here, there we go. Control-C, Control-HVR. Oh, Control-HVF. Why are my borders? Control-C, Control-HV. I have to select all of this. There we go. Okay. We're good. So next thing, we have our surveys. You might do a survey during construction, but for my case, we paid surveys you may pay surveys during your land acquisition, but in my county, you have to pay a survey once your foundation is put in. And this wasn't something that was originally included in my contractor's contract. And so this had to come out of pocket. And so moving forward, this would be in my development budget before I spend any money on the deal. And we'd carry it under this survey amount, under the survey line item. Control-Shift-K, I, underwrite, there we go. We can just copy this. Boom, we'll call it $1,000 each. Next thing we have our furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So FF&E, this would be your hot tub, your sauna, your cold plunge, your rug, your paper towel holder, everything that is movable inside of the cabin, inside of your unit, falls into FF&E. Appliances don't fall into FF&E, but like hot tub wood, sauna wood, if it's not carried under your contractor stuff, furniture, rug, pillows, couches, this all falls under FF&E. And we typically, I think $5 to $15 per square foot for FF&E is a good assumption. There we go, that's formatted. Then we'll also give us some miscellaneous as well. Make that black. We'll copy this format from HVR. And so these miscellaneous expenses, this might be meals, this might be movers, this might be gas on the way to your property. This all should be carried in your financial model and in your development budget. Because ultimately, every meal that you eat, every dollar on gas you spend going to the property is all part of the investment. The investment doesn't make sense if you have to spend, say it's on Mars, you have to spend like millions of dollars to go on gas. Now, this is like a terrible example because it's like maybe not realistic, but if you're spending too much time on gas, or maybe just like too much time driving, that makes the deal not feasible. And so that's why we carry those little things in the budget too. Alt HVR, copy that formatting down. Shift space, Control Shift plus to add more rows. Now this is going to be our financing costs. We'll just call it financing. Then closing costs. Shift space, Control minus to get rid of that. Now, if you could have one closing for your construction to perm loan, so one loan for your permanent financing and your construction financing, or you could do two closes. We talked about this a little bit on our editor. Cut that last part out because we want to use this for YouTube. So depending on the type of loan that you get, you could have a one close loan or a two close loan. The one close loan, you would just get rid of this row. And you just have your closing costs one time. But in my case, I did a two close loan because I projected interest rates to go down. And so you might have to close twice. So that might be, ours was like $8,000 each time, but we'll call it $10,000. There we go. Now, if there's stuff that comes along in your mind that would be an extra soft cost, soft costs are pretty much everything that isn't land or a hard cost. A lot of soft costs. There we go. Just clicking F2, minus, space. There we go. Other costs, number 3. We'll call this, there we go. Now, in our budget, we don't always know how the deal is going to go, right? So we want to carry some contingency to make sure that if we have some overages, we're still able to, complete the deal. Like if I complete my development budget and it says it's going to cost me $400,000, I want to have a 10% contingency to make sure that if the project goes over, I still actually have the funds to complete the project, because it would be a terrible situation if I'm halfway through construction and I don't have the money to continue the deal. So we bake that into our development budget. So we'll put our contingent, I'll just show you guys here. Contingency, our interest reserve, and I'll get to explaining what that is later, our developer fee, and then over here we'll have our total development budget. So our contingency, we want this cell to be flexible, and so I'll do that cool thing with a number. We want this this model to be flexible, right? So we'll carry a 10% contingency. This interest reserve will get calculated later, so we'll just make this yellow. And then our developer fee will be 5%. Now let's change this formatting. So I'm going to click Control 1. I'm going to go into Number, Custom, and then add Contingency. Now I'll add some decimal points here. There we go. And since it is an input cell now, I will make it blue. I'll get rid of this and I'll center it left. So Alt H A L to bring it over to the left. Interest reserve, this now goes here. I can delete that. And then our developer fee, again, Control 1, go into Custom, add decimal points, and then developer fee, all HAL, make that blue, delete that, make this bold, and we'll make all of these cells the gray color, and then we'll also give it HBM, our favorite dotted line, top, middle, and bottom. Bring this cell yellow again. And then 10% contingency, that is as a percentage of the hard costs and the soft costs. So I just want to make sure I'm communicating that to anybody that uses this model in the future of hard plus soft costs. That doesn't need to be huge, so all HFK, and then I can italicize that, copy that, there we go. Now, contingency, ultimately, this is like a subjective thing. This is my financial model, and so there's no one right way to do everything. But the reason why we just have it taken from hard costs and soft costs is because I don't want to add contingency on, say, the developer fee, because then we get into like some circular references. Like the developer fee is sized based off of, it just gets confusing with the calculations. Also, the land purchase price just is what the land purchase price is. I don't have to carry contingency on the land purchase price because it just will be whatever it is. When it comes to contracts, you might have overages in construction, but it doesn't mean that the land value is going to change over time. Same thing with everything that goes on in soft costs. Like these permit inspection fees are pretty known, but we may not have paid the designers yet. We may not have paid all the surveyors yet. We haven't closed on all the loans yet. And so those are kind of like more variable, which is why we're just going to be taking this as a percentage of hard costs plus soft costs. So in order to do that, I'm going to, this equals the sum from here down to here. And I'm going to lock that by clicking F4. I'm going to lock both. So I can copy this down here as well, and it doesn't shift down. Notice like what would happen if I didn't do that. If I take that and now copy it down, you can see the numbers are different. Oh, because it dragged, it's not capturing these two numbers, you know? So you have to make sure that you're locking your cells. Okay, once we got that, we multiplied that number, the sum of the hard and soft costs, by this number right here. And now I can copy that and bring it down. You can see the sum of the hard and soft costs are now being multiplied by this 5%, which is my developer fee. And the developer fee is a fee that if you were building for someone else, they would be paying this to you for your services. For being the developer, you get paid the developer fee. On top of more fees that we can talk about if you're raising capital for your deal. But the developer fee can be anywhere from 3 to 8% of the total project costs. The smaller the project, the higher the fee. That's negotiated between you and the passive capital. But you can see now with how this model works, I can type 8 here, and then it automatically changes this number here. And interest reserve is super important, and we're going to calculate that later, which is why we're leaving it in yellow. And so our total development budget is equal to the sum of everything above it. I can click enter. There we go, our total development budget. Now it's not calculating interest reserve, so this will change in the future, but I'll just bold that, select all of this, all HBS. There we go, and I can get rid of this. Okay, now my development budget is so spread out. I can't really get to see everything like very clearly, and so I'm gonna create a development budget summary. Now this is gonna have our land, our hard costs, our soft costs, our contingency, our interest reserve, our developer fee, and our total development budget. Cool. I'm gonna bold that, select this, go all the way across, all HBS, got that, select the top, all HH, give us the green, boom, and then our land is just the sum of all the land line items. Our hard costs equals the sum of all of our hard costs. Soft costs, select all of this. Contingency just equals this cell. Interest reserve just equals this. And I don't have to highlight that because Excuse me. I don't have to highlight that because when this number changes, this number down here will automatically change. And then the developer fee. Oh, and I mean, what I could have done here is just contingency equals this. And I could have just copied this down like that. But I'll just Alt HVF for the formats or the formulas. Select all this. Control Shift A to make it that format that I like. And there we go. That's zeros should always show up as dashes. Perfect. Exactly how it's shown above here. Boom. And then because I see there's a possibility that you guys are going to add a row here, add $5,000 or $50,000. And okay, it's being calculated here, but I just want to be 100% sure that the development budget shown up here is adding everything from over here as well. So I'll make this equals the sum of this. Yeah, I just always want to make sure that these numbers are reflecting what's actually going on over here. Just going to get rid of that. So I'm just going to do a test. We'll say that if this equals this, we'll do an if statement. So if this equals this, then spit out true. If not, spit out false. So if I make this 1, then we know there's a problem in our financial model. So we want to just be double sure for something like that. So then we'll just make this Alt H B M, give it more borders. We'll do an outline of this. Alt H B M, Alt H B O to give it the bottom border. Alt H H, give it gray, and then make it smaller. Alt H, Alt H F K. So then we'll put in here dev budget and dev budget summary are equal. There we go. So that's an 8 point. We'll make that 8 point as well. Cool. So that is the development budget summary. And we are almost done. We're almost done with the input side. So these are all of our inputs essentially. And then everything that goes on here is going to be modeled in our cash flows, which is the third or the second step. And then the final step is calculating our returns. So we're almost done with the input side. One of the more important parts, or actually all of this is important, but the financing assumptions is what we're going to do next. Alt HH, give it that green. And we're going to do there's 2 assumptions that we're going to need data for. Our construction loan and our permanent financing. I'm going to select all that, and I'm going to hold control and select all of this as well. I'm going to Alt HH. I'm going to give it this gray. Perfect. And so for our construction loan, we're going to need to know something called direct costs. We'll get into that soon. We'll need to know our loan to costs. In other words, LTC, loan to cost. We're going to need to know our loan amount, our equity required, our interest rate, and our term in months. Okay. Then for our permanent financing, we'll need to know our appraised value, our loan to value, our LTV. So LTV is different than LTC. Okay. Loan to value, our loan amount, our interest rate, our term in months, and our monthly payment. Cool. Copy that all the way across. Alt HBS. Boom. And then the last thing, because it's so small, just so we can just clear the mind, is our exit assumptions. These are going to be the things that drive whether, like how much we sell our property for. And for that, we'll just need to know our hold period. We'll do this in years. We'll need to know our exit cap rate. Yeah. And our closing costs. Ooh, we're getting so close. We're getting so close. Alt HH, boom. Control Shift A to make it formatting that we like. I mean, this is actually all going to change. And then we'll make all these blue, so Control Shift B. So our exit cap rate, we can just put in a placeholder number. We'll call it 12%. But I just want to put 12, and then I want to format it as a percentage. So Control Shift 5 to make it a percentage. It's already a percentage. But you can see if I did Control Shift 5, makes it a percentage. And then I just type out 12. Control Alt right arrow to give it more percentage points, because what if it's like 12.25, you know? And then our closing costs are typically paid by the seller, which is us, which is why we're going to include it. And we'll assume 5%. I also want to see more decimal points for that. And then our hold period, we'll make that yellow because we're going to get back to it. Okay, let's get into closing this out. So with our construction loan, my bank is going to look at this number. I'm going to show him my budget. I'm going to say, hey, bank, my project's going to cost this much. And the bank is essentially going to say, well, I'm not going to consider all this as value that I can lend against because I'm not going to pay for your meals. I'm not going to give you financing for your meals, for your gas that you're estimating that you're going to spend, for your mover. Because if you don't pay me back my money, I'm not going to be able to get that. I'm not going to be able to foreclose on that value that I paid you for. Or maybe some like miscellaneous stuff. I think we covered everything, like food, gas. Oh, another good example. The bank is probably not going to lend you against your couch that you plan on installing. Because if you don't pay the bank and they foreclose on the property, you could still go onto the property and remove the couch, remove the rug, remove the paper towel holder, remove all of that. They're costs that you need to be carrying in your budget, but as far as direct costs that the bank can lend against, they can't include them, you know? And so the bank is going to look through your development budget and they're going to tell you what they can consider as a cost, because ultimately they're going to take a loan to cost percentage from your direct costs. They're going to tell you everything that can be included in the cost and everything that can't. So land, purchase price, all this is good. Design costs is all stuff that should be considered. Closing costs is all stuff that needs to be paid, right? But this is an exercise that you should go through with your lender. Ask them, what are all the direct costs? What are all the things that you guys are considering as value? And so how do we arrive at this? Well, I'm going to create a switch in my development budget that I call it direct cost, question mark, Alt HOI to give it the space it deserves. And then I'll make this a switch. So in order to do that, I go to data, I go to data validation, I go to list, and then I'll make one that says yes or no. All right, so apparently I don't need data validation. I don't need quotation marks for this. Well, so we'll say yes or no. Yes. And then because this is an input, I'll make this all HAC to make it centered, and I'll make it blue because this is fundamentally changing our returns. And so I'll also make it Alt HH, make it yellow. And so for the case, just for simplicity, I'm just going to have all of these say yes, but we'll play around with the toggle to make sure that it works. So I'll just Control C, Control V on all the areas. I'm just holding Control while I select this. Control V, boom. And yeah, this is so depending on what type of loan it is, once we all are doing like massive towers, the direct costs are going to be more extensive. So the bank will actually finance the developer fee. The bank will actually finance the interest that you're going to have to pay the bank during construction when the project isn't making any money, which is actually really cool. So the bank will give you more money in order to pay them on the money that they gave you. Pretty cool thing. That's what interest reserve is. Interest reserve is a separate account that you save. It's like a savings account to pay the interest that you're going to need to pay on the construction loan during construction. Because during construction, the project's not making any money. And so you need to set those dollars aside to pay interest when the project isn't making any money. That's your interest reserve account. But for residential loans, the amount of these dollars that are considered direct costs are going to be less, which is why we have this toggle. So now we'll have to create a formula. So we'll call this a sum if formula. So we'll select all of these yeses. That's our range. And the criteria is if says yes. I think we just put yes. Then we'll want to sum everything to the right. Aha, there we go. Okay, so we needed quotation marks. Control Shift A, and then we get to see if this cell says yes, then the cell next to it will be added to our sum. So if I make this a no, we can see that it reduced our direct cost by $10,000. If we turn this into a yes, then it automatically adds to our direct costs. So as a developer, you want as many of these things in your development budget to be a direct cost, because that means that your bank is considering it a direct cost and is going to give you more money for the project. But the bank might say, nope, can't consider that a direct cost. Nope, can't consider that a direct cost. Nope, can't consider that a direct cost. And now your actual budget is $6,000 different than what the bank is considering your project to be. So that's why we have this direct cost toggle right there. So next thing is our loan to cost. We'll assume 90%. And we'll make that blue. And I'll say 90. I think it should be formatted as a percentage already, but Control Shift 5, 90. And loan to costs are typically not more decimal places. It's not going to be like 90.5. So we'll just keep it just like that. So our loan amount is equal to our loan to cost times our direct costs. And then we will make this, again, accounting, Control Shift A, which means our equity required is equal to our total development budget minus our loan amount. That's how much cash we need to bring to the deal. There we go. You know, I actually want to add 2 more rows here. Alt HHN, get rid of that. We'll call this our development budget. Alt HAL, nope. Alt HBL, Alt HBR to add that. And then Alt H6, Alt HFK, Alt HFK. So I just want to know the difference. Alt HFK, Alt HFK. I want to know the difference between the development budget and the direct costs. So the development budget is just equal to this. And the delta is just this minus that. Cool. So now I get to see how much money I'm spending on the project that the bank is not considering actual costs on the project. Okay. Loan amount, direct cost times loan to cost, equity required. That looks good. I'll just keep this a little bit more local, so I'll take the development budget from there. Then our interest rate, this is something that the bank's going to tell us. We'll call it 8.5. Make it a percentage, 8.5. And we'll make it blue and add some decimal places there. So you can see input cells are still being kept in blue, and we need to add the background to keep consistent. And then the term in months. So typically construction loans are 12 months, but you have to confirm with your lender. And we could even do this, make it a little bit more fancy. Just go to numbers, custom, add months, There we go, 12 months, and then I can just call this term. There we go. And to pop into the number formatting, I'm clicking Control 1. And to get rid of that, I'm clicking Escape. So there we go. That is our construction loan assumptions. Now, our appraised value is what we project our property to appraise at after we're done construction. Now, this is not something that you can assume. Well, I guess it's something that you have to assume. But the person that I would go to help you assume what your appraised value is going to be after you're done construction is a realtor in the area that has done a lot of sales, because they're gonna have the greatest feel on the market to know what your project is likely going to sell for once it's complete, or what it's worth, or what it's going to appraise for. So I'm going to assume that number right there. Control Shift A, make that blue. Alt HH, select that. Our loan to value. Now, if we're doing 2 closes, this model is assuming that we're doing 2 closes because that's kind of like the worst. It kind of reduces the returns more, but you also get to cash out. It's just like, it's simpler to model the 1 close loan, and so we're modeling the 2 close loan for those people that will be doing 2 closes. Now, if you're doing a 2 close loan, you're only going to be able to take out the amount. You're only going to be able to take out a loan that's equal to the loan amount that you took out for construction. But if you appraise a certain amount higher, you'll be able to take cash out. And that loan to value maximum is 80%. The bank's not going to let you take any more than 80%. So if you want to take cash out, you have to make sure that 80% of what you appraise for is going to be more than what your construction loan amount is. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough cash. Otherwise, you're just going to default to taking the equal amount of that loan, and you're not going to be able to take any cash out. There we go. So the loan amount is equal to this times that. And here we can see that 80% of what we project to appraise for is not greater than the loan amount for our construction loan. So which means that the actual loan amount that we're going to take out is going to be this right here. So what we can do is the loan amount is equal to the maximum of this, or this times that. So here we can see that because 80% of that is less than our loan amount, the max formula is using this number instead. So we kind of get to play around, and I can essentially I'll go to data, what if analysis, goal seek. I'm going to set this, I'll set this cell right here, okay, we got that, to 461,238. So $1 more than our current loan amount by changing our appraisal amount. So essentially, once I click OK, it's going to tell me how much I need to appraise for in order for me to just take $1 out, to be able to just take $1 out in our cash out refinance. I'm going to click OK. It's calculating. Okay, and there we go. We have to appraise for $576,000 or more in order for us to be able to do a cash out refinance. So if I'm going into this deal and I know that number, and okay, we got our development budget right here, and I don't think, or I'm talking to a realtor, and the realtor doesn't think that I'm going to be able to appraise for $576,000 or more, then it's probably better just to do a 1 close construction loan. This is actually really important. It's probably better just to do a 1 close construction loan, because I'll be saving $10,000 on the closing costs alone just to be able to refi. And if I'm not going to be able to take any cash out in the refi, then I better be saving money on the interest rate, or yeah, that's probably it. Then I better just be saving money on the interest rate. And that's exactly why we do financial modeling, is to make smarter financial decisions. All right. So here we go. We'll still assume that we appraised for 550, which means we're defaulting back to that. Our interest rate is going to be less than construction. We'll call it 6.75%. 6.75. Boom. Now our term for a standard 30-year mortgage is going to be 360 months. And then our monthly payment, all right, let's do our calculation, is equal to the PMT function, which is taking our rate dividing it by 12, taking our amount of periods, which is the amount of the term of our loan. Then we're taking the negative of the loan amount and then closing it, clicking enter, and that is what our monthly payment on our loan will be before interest, before taxes, before insurance, which is sometimes lumped into your monthly payment, but sometimes not. Okay, and that is all of your financing assumptions. Last thing to do is Alt HBS, Alt HH green, and we'll just make a switch here for our hold period. So we'll go to data validation. We'll give it 5 years. A 5-year hold period is pretty long. And anything after 5 years, maybe the financial model kind of, we don't know how much it's going to appraise for. It's kind of harder to project how much it's going to sell. So we'll just cap it at 5. And actually, I need to use this number moving forward. So I have to change this. I actually have to make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. 1, 2. Okay. And then what I could do, Control 1, go into custom. Yeah, that's good. Alt HH. Now that that's filled out, boom, Alt H. We'll make this standard number, so Control Shift M. Actually, I want that to the right. Alt HAR. Okay, no, I want to send it. Alt HAC. Okay, hold period years, cap rate looking good. All right, so we have interest reserve still to calculate, and then our returns. Our development budget we can do right now. This is equal to right there, enter. Our equity required was calculated in our financing assumptions. It's important to know how much money you need in order to do a deal, because then you could determine whether you need to raise capital from family and friends or whatnot. And then the hold period, we got that down here, and that is where I'm going to do custom. And I might get rid of the 1-year option, because if you're going to be selling based on a cap rate, if you build in 1 year and you want to sell, you have no income history. And so it really doesn't make sense to have that. So I will get rid of it. Go to data validation, and get rid of that 1. All right. And then we can get rid of that. Alt HHN. Okay. And okay, actually we can calculate yield on cost. So our yield on cost is just equal to our net operating income divided by our development budget. Click enter, make that a percentage. Give me some more decimals, Alt HHN, Control Shift K to make it black because it's an output cell. And that is about just as much as we can calculate right now. For the rest of it, we'll have to do our cash flow, which is what we're going to do next. Moving into the cash flows, we're going to make this smaller. So we're going to do Alt HOW, click 1, then enter. And then we are going to, we'll start here. We may need to adjust. But we'll start with our land acquisition date. Land acquisition date. I think that's being spelled correctly. Then Alt HAR, and then Alt H FK, then Control I, then hold Control and then click I. There we go. And then we're gonna Alt HH, give it that beige color, and then we're going to click Control Shift 3 to format it as a date. And then we're just gonna assume today's date. We're gonna assume we acquired the land today, which is the 1st of August, 2026. There we go, and then you can see it automatically formats it in a standard format. So we can Control Shift 3 is how we get there. And since this is an input cell, we're gonna click Control Shift V and make it blue. Next thing is we're gonna go above. We're just gonna click 0. We're gonna go above one more and we're gonna do 0. Now I'm gonna format this as a month. So using our shortcut, we're gonna click Control Shift Alt M. Now it makes it a month. Then right above, Control Shift Alt Y, and it makes that a year. So you can still see it's acting as a number, but it says year. So now when I go equals this cell plus 1, it says this is year 1. Then if I go over here, plus 1, then it says year 2. But we're gonna do things a little bit differently. So for months, we're gonna go this plus 1, and we're gonna bring this out to month 6 years out worth of months. So 5 years brings us to 60, 6 years brings us to 72 months. Click that, and I'm gonna hide every column to the right. So I'm gonna do Control 0. to show you what I did again, Control space to select the column, Control Shift right arrow to select everything to the right, and then Control 0 to hide everything after that. All right, then we're gonna go over here, right above month, we're gonna do equals. What are we gonna do? Equals, round up, click tab, round up this number divided by 12, round up to 0 digits. There we go. And now if I copy that formula over, then once I get to month 13, it's going to round up to year 2. And then in order to advance 12 cells to the right, I'm just going to hold Control Alt and then right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, and it's going to advance me 12 cells to the right. Little shortcut there. So year 6, bringing me out all the way to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, yeah, we're showing all of year 6. Then Control Alt, left, 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 brings us all the way back to year 0. So that calculation is working correctly. And the next one is just to do our dates. So for our dates, I'll make this the 5th or halfway through the month. So 15 August 2026, Alt HOI to give us space. So anytime you see those hashtags, it means that there's not enough space. So I'm just going to click Alt HOI to give me enough space. And then month 1 is just going to be the end of this previous month. The end of this previous month. So I'm going to do EO month, click that date, and then we're not moving forward any months. So just click 0 and it spits out this code. But if I click Control Shift 3 and then Alt HOI to give me enough space, you can see that that code was actually a date, but it just wasn't formatted as a date, which is why we click Control Shift 3. Then for every month after that, I'm just gonna click EO month and then move it forward. So that's start date, and then we're gonna move it forward 1 month. So we put a 1 right after that. You can see it spits out this code. So Control Shift 3, Alt HOI, and it gives me the end of the month after August, which is September. So our formulas are working good. If I make this the 1st of August 2026, then this stays as that date. But if I make it the 1st of September 2026, then this is going to be that last day of September. This is going to be the last day of October. So our formulas are working well. Alt HOI. Let's find out what width this is. So it's at 8.5. So what I'm going to do, Control space, Control Shift right arrow, Alt HOW, and I'll make the width of all of them 9, just to make sure I'm not running into this issue where I have to Alt HOI every time. So then we can just copy this formula over. Control C, Control V. And then again, I'm just gonna Control Alt right arrow, Control Sharp, Alt right arrow, and I should be moving forward to each July, 1 year moving into the future. July, and then August. There we go. So it's working. Next thing we're gonna do is call this our unlevered cash flow. And you'll get to understand why it's called the unlevered cash flow soon. To fix that, we just do Alt HAR, Alt HAR. There we go, we're fixed. Control Shift right arrow, Alt HH, make it green, and we're good. So we're getting into cash flows. So cash flows are organized in the same way in every single real estate financial model, and it starts with investment cash flows. Then it moves into operating cash flows. Then it flows into disposition cash flows. Then it flows into net cash flow. But this is the unlevered cash flow. And then we can just shorten this. We know this is cash flows because we have this up here. So we'll just call this disposition. We'll call this operating, and we'll call this investment. Boom. So our investment cash flows are really just our development budget. But in our development budget, all we see is one number. But how does that number play out over time? How are we spending that number over these months of our investment period? Well, let's model it out. So in our investment, I'll just go to I'll click equals, I'll go down to our development budget summary, I'll click enter, and then we can see land shows up right there. Control C, go down, Control V, and we get to see everything copies down. Beautiful. Control X, Control V just to bring that down. Okay, perfect. Now I'm just gonna indent this by clicking Alt H6. There we go. Things are looking good. Now I want to see, I know we have those numbers all the way down there, but I want to see my investment cash flows lining up here as well. So I'm going to do that by clicking equals, going down to my budget summary, clicking enter, and then there we go. So now I can just copy that down. I get to see all my numbers are lining up with what they should be. Beautiful. But because these cells are black, it makes it seem like these are being calculated, when in reality, they're already being calculated. They're just being referenced on another part of this sheet. And so I'm going to make these cells a different color that we haven't seen so far. I'm going to make them green. So to do that, I'm going to click Control-Shift-G. And that just tells me that they're not calculated, but they're just being referenced from another part of the sheet. And so because of that, there's a couple other places on this model where we're just referencing cells that already exist. Like our development budget, we can make that green. Our direct costs are being calculated. This is being calculated. There we go. Okay, it seems like this is the only place where things are being referenced directly. And obviously this is all just like one big reference, so we don't have to make that green. But there we go. So green, a new convention in real estate financial modeling. Now obviously this is still empty, so I'm gonna make that yellow. Now for our investment cash flows, I'm just gonna assume, now for our investment cash flows, the land, all of it's going to be spent in month 0. And so I'm just going to do equals all of this when the month equals 0. Oh, so we'll start with land. So essentially what we want to do is we want to make one formula right here to where when we drag out that formula, it changes based on what we needed to do. So I'm going to click enter. And essentially the land is only going to get spent on this date. Land is already bought. Land is bought on this date. And so all of our land expenses are going out the door on this date. And so essentially when the month equals 0, we're going to need to spit out this number. But look at what happens if I don't lock it. I move it over and then it just references other cell, which is fine. But really I want this red cell to be sticking to that point right there. So I'm just going to lock it. Now I can copy this all the way over, and there we go. Our land cash flows are modeled. All right, so let's move on to hard costs. Now, I want to give myself some space in between these two numbers. So I'm going to click Control Space, Control Shift Plus. Now I get this here. I'm going to Control Space, Alt H-O-W, click 1, Enter, and then we are good. I'm just going to HHN to get rid of that. Boom. So our hard costs start in month 1 and they end when construction is complete, which based on our input, we're going to assume that our construction is going to end at the end of 12 months because our construction loan is 12 months. If our construction loan was 18 months, then the conservative assumption would be to assume that construction took all 18 months. It'd be great if we could finish it in 6 months, but we're going to assume that it's going to take the entirety of the construction term. If you wanted to, you could have a separate cell in financing assumptions to say construction duration, or we could have that up here. But we want to keep this really simple and we want to keep it conservative. And so we're just going to assume that construction takes all of the financing period. So I'm going to click equals when month is greater than 0. And when month, also by the way, for this, a lot of these cells moving forward, we're going to do this thing where we do equals and then a series of like different statements in parentheses, just like that. And this is called Boolean logic. So I go up here, I say if this equals 0, if I click enter, it's going to spit out true. And if I copy this over, it's going to spit out false because this cell that it's referencing to does not equal 0. And this cell it's referencing to does not equal 0. But what I can do also is so just for example, if I change this to 1, then it would spit out true. So when we see true in Excel, it also counts as a 1 or a 0. So if I did equals this, it says true, okay. But what if I did this times 10? Because a true is essentially playing the role as a 1. 1 times 10 equals 10. But 10 times 0, because false counts as 0 in Excel, we get left with a 0. So that principle in Excel is going to be very helpful for us moving forward as we continue to financially model. So when month is greater than 0, and by multiplying two of these statements together, we can create like an and situation. And month is less than or equal to our construction duration, I'm going to lock that cell, clicking F4, then it's going to give us a 0 because month is not greater than 0. It is 0, so it spits out 0. So if I copy and paste this, I should essentially see ones for every time month is greater than 0 or less than or equal to 12. So we'll copy that over, and we see, there we go, once this cell is greater than 0, okay, that's true, but month is no longer less than or equal to 12, which this red cell is 12, so we're starting to get zeros. Perfect. Now, if I were to change this cell down here to 18 months, then after 18, we start to see zeros. So what can we do with this? So our hard costs are going to be spent equally, or for our financial model, we're going to assume that they're going to be spent equally across the entire construction duration, which means that we can just take this and multiply it by our hard costs, lock that in place. Our construction duration is not 18 months, so we're going to change that back to 12, if we can find it. Right here, 12, which means that our formula is stopping at 12. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we can multiply this by our hard costs divided by, and we want to lock our hard costs, divided by our construction duration, and lock the construction duration as well. And then if we copy that all the way over, our construction costs are equally expensed across the 12 months of construction. And if I change this to, say, 24 months, then our construction costs are now spread over equally over 24 months. Perfect. So I'm going to Control Z to bring that back to 12 months. And now I want to do a check. So I want to make sure that the sum of all these cash flows are equal to what our budget is reflecting. Because if it's not, if the sum of all these cash flows are, say, 400, then where's that extra $50,000 coming from? We essentially want to do a check on our work. And so what I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to do if this equals the sum of all these cash flows to the right, then spit off true, and if not, spit out false. And I have to close this parenthesis right there. Okay. Alt HFK, make that smaller. Control C, bring that down. Control V. Okay, so we can see, all right, our work on hard costs is complete because this says true. Perfect. Now let's do our soft costs. So we're going to assume our soft costs and our contingency. Yep. We're going to assume that our soft costs and our contingency are also equally spread out throughout construction. So, which means I can essentially use this same formula, but pull it down. The only thing that's different is that this value is different. So how can I change that? So if I just copy this formula down and I opened it, this cell is still taking this number from up here. And instead of looking at the month, it's looking at this date right here. And let's look at one last thing. Okay, it's correct. It's pulling the same, or the right number for that. So let's fix this. Let's fix this cell, and let's make it so that when we pull the formula down, just our row stays locked for this blue cell, which means that if I click F4 once, it locks all of that cell. If I click it one more time, we can see the $sign right here next to the number only, which means that it's only locking the row. Now I want to do the same thing here. So I click F4 twice. Now I want this to be locked completely, which is good. But this cell right here, I just want the column to be locked, because when I drag this formula down, I want it to start to pick up the soft costs. But when I drag it across, I still want it to be picking up soft costs, not the cell to the right. So I'm going to lock it. I'm going to click F4 3 times until the $sign is just next to O, just next to the row or the column. And then I'm done. So I can now copy that formula for the hard costs, and everything's going to function the same. But if I drag that formula down to our soft costs, I can see that I'm still pulling our month, I'm still pulling my soft costs, and if I copy this formula to the right, I'm still referencing the correct cells. And of course, this cell didn't change, so it's still pulling that correctly. So if I just Control C, Control V all the way to the right, that is working correctly, and the sum of all these is equal to 52. Perfect, and we're going to assume the same thing occurs with our contingency. And there we go. The sum of this, $40,390. $40,390. All right, so next thing is our interest reserve. So we're again going to skip this over. We're going to Control Shift Y to highlight that to remind us to get back to it. Next thing is our developer fee. So typically the developer fee is the timing of it is strategic because the developer fee is strategically placed to align incentives between the general partner, which is the developer, and the limited partner, which is the passive capital. So if the developer got all their fee in month 0 when they acquired the land, then, and that's how they make the most of their money from the deal is the developer fee, then why are they going to care for the rest of the project? They already got their fee. And so the developer fee is typically paid out, it depends on how it gets negotiated. It could get paid out in installments. So based on different construction milestones. So once when the foundation is complete, when permits are given, all this. But we're going to assume the most conservative route, which is all of the fee gets paid out when the project gets built. So in month 12. But what if construction takes 18 months? So we don't want it to be stuck to month 12. We actually want it to be paid out the month after construction is complete. And so we'll have it due the month after the construction duration. So in order to do that, we're going to say we want it to return true when this cell equals the construction duration. Fix that by clicking F4 plus 1. Close that parentheses, copy that formula over, and then you get to see the only time it shows true is for the single month after the 12 months. And so just to confirm that our formula is working correctly, if I make this 18, then not only is our cash flows extending by an extra 6 months, but this cell is true for only the 1 month after construction is complete. So I'm going to Control Z that. There we go. Click developer fee, and then we're going to multiply that by this fee. Fix it by clicking F4, Control C, Control V, and then we can see developer fee gets paid out then. Beautiful. So which means that the total development budget spend every month is just equal to the sum of everything right above, like that. And a shortcut that we could do is just by holding Alt equals. Oh, and because nothing is here, so if I just click 0 and I made it the accounting format, copy that all the way over. If I just do Alt equals, then it automatically takes the sum of everything moving forward. But instead of doing this for each one, I can just copy this formula, Control Shift right arrow, select that all, then Control V and paste everything. So it looks like everything is calculating correctly. And so let's go ahead and do interest reserve. So interest reserve is pretty interesting. It can get very complicated with how much you want to calculate it. If we were doing a $300 million tower, we would do a whole draw schedule and we would compare our equity required compared to our how much money is coming from the bank. But we're gonna make a general assumption for interest reserve, and that is that our down payment, or that is that our equity required is gonna be relatively similar to our land purchase price. That's the assumption that we're gonna make. And when we make that assumption, it allows us to calculate interest reserve a lot easier. So interest reserve is going to be calculated by taking, before we go into that, your payment on your construction loan, we'll back up even further. So interest reserve for each month is essentially calculating how much your interest payment is going to be for each month of construction. That's essentially what we're calculating. We're trying to calculate how much we're going to spend in construction interest in month 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the way that construction interest is calculated is by taking the sum of all the spend on the project from the previous month. So our interest payment in month 6 is going to be the interest rate divided by 12 times the sum of all the spend on the project in all the months previous, which is $185,000. Now that's why we can get very into the weeds with what's a direct cost, what's not a direct cost, what's the loan to cost. All this is going to, impact how many of these dollars are actually coming from the bank and how many of them are not. But our interest reserve number is not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to be 95% accurate when we do it this way. If we were moving millions of dollars, we want to be a little bit more accurate, but we can get away with being a little bit, get away with being a little bit more simple with this model. So interest reserve, first we have to find how much spend is on the project in the previous month. So with these complicated formulas, because interest reserve is probably going to be one of the more complicated formulas that we make, is I like to build it in phases. So the first phase is that I want this cell to equal the sum of everything here. And then I want this cell to equal the sum of everything here. I want this cell to equal the sum of everything here. I want this cell to equal the sum of everything here. But I want to just write one formula for it. So this is how we're going to do it. This equals the sum of all of these. There we go. So I'm just going to lock this cell right here. And that's not correct. Sum, there we go. That's calculating correctly. And if I copy that all the way over the cell, there we go. And you might be asking, why aren't we taking the sum of this month's spend? And it's because think about how your credit card is paid. When you're paying off your credit card, you're paying it from the previous statement. And construction loans work the same way. There we go. So that's working. But one thing that I need to fix is that I'm not going to be paying construction interest in month 13 because I'm going to refinance in month 12. The construction loan only works for 12 months. After that, I'm not going to be doing construction interest, which means I'm not going to be spending on interest reserve. And so that means that this cell should only output when the month is less than or equal to the construction duration, which we're saying is this right here. I'm going to lock that, close it, and multiply the sum. There we go. So I'm now going to copy that over. And now we can see that our formula is working up until month 12. After month 12, it just returns 0, which is what we want to see. Perfect. So now the next thing is now we know that in month 2, the sum of all the spend, that we're assuming these dollars are all coming from the bank because we assume that this purchase all came out of equity. It all came out of cash. Okay. And that's, part of this interest reserve thing is like we're assuming that our land purchase is going to be similar to our equity required, which is around the same. I think for most projects it's typically going to be 10 to 20%, which is fine. So then we take this amount and we multiply it by the interest rate for the construction loan interest rate, lock that and divide it by 12. If we copy that, I'm just clicking Control C and then Control Shift right arrow and then Control V. We get to see our construction interest spread out over the course of construction. And then in month 13, it stops. That's perfect. Which means that in month 2, we're going to get our first payment. It's only going to be $262, and it's going to slowly increase as our spend on the project increases. Now this cell equals the sum of everything here, which is $17,000. So you're going to spend $17,000 on the course of construction on just interest, which is why you need to have that cash readily available to you. And then this cell right here is equal to this right here. And now that number has now hit our development budget, which increased our project to $535,000. I'm gonna make this cell green because it's being referenced, and I'm gonna return it to that gray color. Now, some banks will allow you to have interest reserve be a direct cost. But if I don't make it a direct cost, then my equity required just went up a considerable amount, which is why you want to be asking your lender if they consider interest reserve as a direct cost on the project. Because you're going to be spending on interest the same way that you're spending on construction. And so most banks, it really depends on the bank whether they're going to consider it a direct cost or not. But it's important to know early on because you can see what effect it has on your project as far as like the capital required to complete the project. So now that that's complete, I can select all of that, all HHN, get rid of that highlight, and our budgets are working beautifully. There we go. So moving forward, our operating cash flows are just our revenue. So now, before then, our unlevered cash flows, we get to see all the dollars that are going to be spent on our project as the investment. These are all dollars leaving the door. These are our investment cash flows. These are the dollars we spend in order to earn our income, our revenue. That's what we're going to model next. Revenue, our expenses, and then we have our net operating income. And then over here, instead of total development budget, we're actually going to call it net investment cash flow. Okay, and then we're going to make this cell equal the sum of everything above it. We're going to make it black because it's being calculated, not referenced. And we're going to underline everything here. like that. And then we're gonna bold everything on this row. I'm gonna bold everything in that row, and everything is working correctly. So now we're gonna do our operating cash flow. So we're gonna indent this by clicking Alt H6. There we go. And then we're gonna put year one here. We're gonna Alt HAC, center it, Control I, Alt HFK, Control U to underline it, and we got year one. So our year one is going to be equal to what we have over here, our revenue, and we can just copy that down, our expenses, and we can make this Control Shift G, make it green, underline it, and then Alt equals to take a sum above it, boom. And everything in this row is going to be bold, so we can just do that right now. Control B, beautiful. And that's not working correctly, so this actually should be equals revenue minus expenses, net operating income. So now our operating income is only going to start after construction ends. Now we might do pre-bookings, we might get some revenue before the project's complete, but that would make our returns look better. And we don't know if whether we're going to be able to get bookings. And so like everything else in financial modeling, we're going to model conservatively. We're going to assume that the first time that we make money is when we open. And the next thing is that there likely is some seasonality to this whole, it's just a fact. There is seasonality in short-term rentals, but we're going to assume that we earn the same amount in each month by taking our annual revenue and our annual expenses and dividing them by 12. We could easily assume that our electric is going to increase during the winter months because we're going to be spending more on heating or more on the hot tub or all these different things. But we're just going to assume that it averages all out. The thing that we are going to include in our financial model is that we're going to assume, because of inflation, that we're going to be able to increase our rent every single year, and that our expenses will also increase every single year. And that's going to be growth. I'm going to copy this formatting over, Alt HVR for formatting, and then we're going to assume 3% revenue growth every year. I'm going to make that a percentage. Control Shift 5, Control Alt right arrow, make that blue. Since this changes our financial returns, I'm going to give it that yellow backdrop. Control C, Control V. There we go. So our growth, Alt Control HAC to center it. Beautiful. So now that we have this as an input, we need to fill out what our cash flows look like. So our cash flows only start after construction ends. So essentially, just like all the other formulas we do, we're going to build it one by one. So the first thing is we only want this to spit out a value when month is greater than the construction period. Let's go over here, 12 months. Bold that. And then also we want this formula to work for revenue and expenses, which means that when we drag this down, we don't want the month to drag down as well. So I'm going to click F4 twice to lock in the row. And there we go. So essentially what we should see is falses, falses, falses until we get into month 13. And then you guys have seen me do it enough times, but if we were to change that cell down there, we'll do it. Why not? Do 24, or let's just change it to 4. We can see that we're going to start seeing trues in month 5 because construction ends in month 4. There we go. So that's working correctly. The next thing is that if our comps are doing $100,000, it means that they did $100,000 in the past 365 days, which means, and we know that rents increase every single year because of inflation. So this number right here was last year's number. It should increase this year one time because we're building for a whole year. So this year's rents are going to be greater than 100,000. And then once we start to build, or once we start to operate, that's going to be 2 years of growth from the point that we got this comp. So that's called trend. Our rents could trend 3% from this point. But we model conservatively, which means that if we're taking an average of these comps and we're not going to operate for this year and we're going to start operations in this year, we're still going to assume that we're going to earn the average of these rents. And so while some people will financial model 2 years of rent growth before operations start, we're not going to do this. We're going to do an untrended analysis. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to multiply this by year 1 divided by 12. There we go. And then we want to be able to drag this down, which means I need to lock this column. So click F4 3 times. And there we go. If I select 12 of these cells up until year 4, up until year 3, there we go. The sum is 110,000, which is the sum here. Perfect. But our rents are not increasing at the end of year 2. So let's fix that. Oh, and our expenses are calculating correctly as well. Let's see. There we go. 45,455, 45,455. Perfect. Now we'll just do this while we're here. We'll underline this and then we'll take the difference between these two. So this minus revenue minus expenses equals our monthly net operating income. Paste that and there we go. We have our NOI right there. Beautiful. So let's do the rent growth now. So our rent growth is equal to this times 1 plus the growth. And we're going to lock the column raised to the year minus, if I did that correctly, I did it incorrectly. Okay. I did it incorrectly. Okay. And it was because I raised it only to the 1 and not to 2. So we can see here that our rents increased 3% because this should be 110,000, but it's 113,000. So simple fix the formula, subtract this by 2, copy that over, which means that our first year of operation should be 110. Let's see, beautiful, 110, and then at the end of year 2, we can see this steps up 3%. Beautiful. So the next thing is just to make sure that this formula, before I drag this down, is fixed to the row. Perfect. Now I can just copy this down. Alt H V F. And now these first 12 months, 45,455, 45,455, and then we get to see the expense bump right there in year 5. And so if I were to make rent growth 5 and expense growth 5, we get to see that that automatically reflects in these calculations. And it happens every single year. So in between years 3 and 4, we see a rent increase. Years 4 and 5, we see a rent increase. Years 5 and 6, we see a rent increase, which means that our rent growth is working. And if we just make growth 0, which you could do a completely untrended analysis and assume that you're not going to get any rent growth, which would be the most conservative way to do your financial modeling, you can see that even at the end of year 6, you're still earning the same as you did when you opened shop. Perfect. So our calculations are working, which means that the last thing that we have to do is calculate disposition. So the last step is disposition, and this is when you sell the property. So we have here on the left, we have our exit value, which is the value that you sell for. This could also be terminal value. I just use exit value. Then we have our closing costs. I'm gonna indent both of these by selecting them both, shift up arrow one time, alt H6. And then that leaves us as the net proceeds from, we'll call it net unlevered proceeds from sale. Beautiful. Gonna bold that. So our exit value, the first thing is, when is it gonna happen? Our exit is going to occur when we say our hold period ends. So if our hold period is 2, then our exit is going to occur at the end of year 2, so in month 24. And then if our hold period is 3 years, then we want it to be in month 36, and so on. And so we need it to be dynamic based on this cell. So how do we write a formula to do that? So we do that by taking this cell minus this. We'll make that a number, copy that, send it over. Oh, incorrect. So I need to make this the year. So this returns a 1 now at the end of each year. So end of year 2, end of year 3, end of year 4, end of year 5, and then that. Okay, perfect. But also the year has to be equal to the year that we want to exit. Lock that cell, close the parentheses, enter, copy that over. And we essentially have it only showing up a 1 one time throughout the whole cash flow, and it's the year that we have in the hold period. So just to make sure that it works, if we convert this to 4, we should have the 1 show up only one time at the end of year 4. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, it works. So we're gonna change this to 2, boom. And the exit value, we'll calculate it right here, and then we'll spread the formula over. But the exit value is gonna be calculated by taking NOI and dividing it by a cap rate. Now this might be a foreign concept for some some of you, but that's how it's calculated. And if you want more information, I can point you towards more resources. But the way that investors look at valuing these properties is by taking NOI, dividing it by a cap rate, and that's how they determine how much it's worth. So let's calculate that. The thing that we have to know before that is these investors are not looking at last year's cash flow because that's in the past. They're projecting how much it's going to earn in the future 12 months, which is why even though our hold period is at a maximum of 5 years, we show a whole year worth of cash flow after that because we need to know that for our reversion cash flow. So reversion cash flow, disposition cash flow, exit cash flow, they all mean the same thing. So the year after we're projecting the sale is also called the reversion year. So in order to calculate our exit value, we take the sum, right? Exit value is equal to NOI divided by cap rate. So first we have to do the NOI equals the forward looking 12 months of cash flows, and we divide that by the exit cap rate, which is all the way over here. Boom, lock that cell, click enter, and that's the exit value. There we go. Which means that if I take this formula, Control C, copy it all the way over, and then if I made this cell right here a 2, then it's calculating the exit value at the end of year 2, but it's taking year 3's NOI, 12 months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, perfect, of cash flows, and dividing it by our cap rate down here. So our reversion cash flow is working. The next thing that we have to do is calculate our closing costs. So as the seller, we have to pay the closing costs. So we have to calculate that. And that is equal to our exit value times the negative, or we could even do the negative times the percentage right here. And I click Control Shift A to turn this into an accounting number. And in accounting, negative numbers show up in parentheses. And this is perfect. So this is 5% of this number right here. So I can just copy that all the way over. So now, regardless of when we sell the property, we sell it in year 3, we still have our closing costs being shown right here. So now I can underline this. I can take a sum of that, Control C. And to take the sum again, I'm just clicking Alt equals, clicking enter, and then Control C, Control V to get that net unlevered proceeds from sale number. Beautiful. Now, the last thing to do is to calculate our net unlevered cash flow, which is pretty simple. Our net unlevered cash flow. And for here, actually before that, I'm gonna show what our reversion cash flow looks like. There we go. And some things like expenses are never shown negative, closing costs are shown negative, and then debt payments are shown negative. And so even though both of these are being subtracted, expenses and closing costs, it's just how it's done. Don't ask me why. So we bold that, and then unlevered cash flow equals the negative of our investment cash flows, because this is cash out the door, plus our net operating income in that month, plus our proceeds from sale. Click enter, Control C, Control V, and then we get to see how much money is going either out the door or in the door every single month until we exit. The thing that's wrong with our model right now is that we're showing money coming in the door after we sell the property, which is going to cause problems in our financial returns. And so we have to find a way to have these cash flows over here stop the month after we sell the property. And so that's actually a pretty simple thing to do. It starts with another statement at the start of this cell. That statement is when year, and we're going to lock the row, is less than or equal to our hold period, and we're going to lock that. Then do your thing. We click enter, Control C, HVF, then our cash flows stop working. But because, okay, we have to fix something. But because we were using those cash flows to calculate our reversion cash flow, it stopped doing that. So we have to fix that. So I will, how do I want to do this? So we have to show the future 12 months of cash flows for our reversion. The thing that we don't need is everything after, okay. So this is how we're going to do it. We're just going to apply that Boolean logic that I took up here. We're just going to Control X this. Control X, actually, yeah. So I did only copy it right here, so yeah, perfect. I'm just gonna Control X that, click enter, perfect. I'm just gonna apply that at the start of here, excuse me. And once again, it's not working, let's see why. So when year 4 is less than or equal to G132. Okay, but it is, so I think this is the last thing that I have to do. I just have to put this in parentheses, click enter, copy that over, and then if I'm not mistaken, boom, there we go. Our formula is now working. And so that is the end of our net unlevered cash flow. Just select all of this, Control Shift right arrow, Alt H B S. We have our boundary, and then I'm just gonna bold this right here, and we're done with our unlevered cash flow. Okay, and then we're just gonna bold this. I'm gonna turn this into 3 and 3. And you can see what that does to our exit price. If we're growing revenue, then that means we're gonna sell at an extra. It's pretty significant what 3% can do to an exit value, because you're increasing the amount the property earns, which directly increases how much the property is worth. Very cool. Just making sure this is calculating correctly. So 20,000 is going out the door, 5,000 is coming in the door, so 14,000 makes sense. Just making sure this is calculating correctly. We sell, our proceeds are this, we make an extra $5,000 from cash flow, and then we earn nothing after year 4. Perfect. So our levered cash flows are a little bit easier. We're gonna do Alt HH, the green we like, oh, Control Z, boom, perfect. And now we follow the same framework. We have our investment cash flows, we have our operating cash flows, and we have our disposition cash flows, and then we have our net levered cash flow. So now for our levered cash flow, our investment, even though during construction we're seeing these dollars go out the door, that's not exactly cash leaving our pocket, right? And so for our levered cash flow, our investment is really just all of our cash. And this is really just our equity required. So I'll just shorten it to equity. So Alt H6 to edit that, or to indent that, and then we have net investment cash flow. And so we could just have our equity investment is going to vary greatly. You know, we're going to, maybe we put down some now and then we pay our equity out over the course of construction to pay down our construction interest. Or maybe we put all of our equity down and then the loan pays itself with our interest reserve and the bank is financing that. And so there's so many ways to model our cash leaving the door. But the most conservative way to do it, which is what we want to do, right, is just model all of it leaving the door at once, as early as possible. The less conservative way to do it would be to have it all leave later. But the sooner it goes out the door, that's the sooner that our time value of money calculations start. That's the worse it's gonna make our returns look. But that's fine because we wanna be as conservative as possible. So we wanna just show that equity leaving the door pretty much as soon as possible. So how do we model that? All right, so this is actually so how do we model that? So, okay, so this is, before we do that, let's just put our equity that we have to put into the deal right here. That's just this number right here, boom. And we make that green by clicking Control Shift G, underline that, and then this just equals that, and then we bold. All right, so our equity investment essentially is however much cash needs to be paid up until all of our equity is depleted, if that makes sense. So in this case, our equity out the door will be $54,000, and then in the next month is just going to be however much money we have left in our equity account, and then every dollar after that we'll just consider be debt. And so we accomplish that using a min function. That's just the minimum of this, or the net investment cash flow minus the sum of everything that happened previously. So we just need to make sure we lock this, close that, and we're good. And so if we copy this over, so we accomplish that by using a min function and taking the minimum of either the amount of cash we need or the amount of cash we have available to spend minus the total amount of money we've already spent in equity. There we go. So in this case, it's taking the minimum, either the total amount of cash that we need. Since this is less than how much cash we have, we're not going to spend more equity than the project requires, right? But in this month, if I copy this formula over, there we go. So this, go here, this red needs to stay, and that should fix it. There we go. So then this month, we need $37,000, but we only have $4,979 left in equity. And that's what we're able to spend. And that is how you model equity. So we're gonna underline this. This just equals what's right above it. And so that's good. That's our investment cash flow. So then we move to our operating cash flow. So this is the situation where the bank is considering this interest reserve as a direct cost. And you can see like, all right, well, how is this possible? I'm able to complete the project with only $4,900. Well, it's because the bank is literally financing every other cost on the project, including everything that you have for your miscellaneous, which is why it's so important to look at all this and see what's actually being a direct cost and what's not. And so here, okay, actually the only difference is a $6,000 difference in direct cost. So let's just say no, the bank won't consider interest reserve. That increases our equity required, which I'll Alt-HOI, so we're able to see all of that. And no, I don't need all of that. That should be good enough. Then we can see more cash coming out the door here, right? So you need to, playing around with the direct cost is going to be really important. So now we get into our operating cash flow. We already calculated our net operating income. So we can just type that out and we can just bring that from above. So this just equals our net operating income. We can copy that over and we see that. The thing that's different in the levered cash flow is that we have our debt. Why did I say debt? Our debt service, Alt H6 to indent that. And then after that, the difference between these two numbers is called cash flow after financing. And that's what you get. So our debt service is equal to what we already calculated it to be, which is this. I click F4 to fix it. And if I just copy it over, well, I'm going to change the formatting to accounting. So Control Shift A, and then I'm going to make it negative. So I think debt service should be negative. I'm going to Alt HOI. Let's check out the width. Alt HO. W. All right, wait, yeah, we should be good. Control C. Now, why are we showing debt service when we're not in operations? And so what we're going to do here is that we should only ever see something here when the cell above it is greater than 0. So that's what that does. It references the cell above, and then if it's greater than 0, then we get to see the debt service number. So we can copy that over, and there we go. Our debt service is showing. So after that, we just take the difference between the two after underlining. So to do that, I just Control Shift right arrow, Control U to underline, and then we're back. Then because this is already negative, I can just Alt equals, just like that. Now I can copy that formula over, but before I do, I'll Control B to bold it. We're gonna bold that, Control C, Control Shift right arrow, Control V, and we have our cash flow. This is actual money that's hitting our bank account because NOI already reflects taking out expenses, and then we're taking out our debt service, and then this is actual money that we get to keep. Beautiful. After cash flow, after financing, we can take this, Control X, bring this up. We have our disposition. But actually before that, we have to model out what happens if we have a cash out refinance. So I'm just gonna Control X all of this, Control V, then go up, and then we'll call this loan payoff and cash out. I think we need some more space, so I'll Control X, Control V. And then for this, we need our construction loan amount. We need our permanent financing loan amount. And the difference between the two is our cash out. Bold that. So our construction loan amount is equal to, well, we have it right here, loan amount. And then we can make that green, Control Shift G. And then our permanent financing loan amount is equal to our permanent financing loan amount, which we can also make green. And we can underline that by Control U, and then taking the difference between the two, which would be the permanent loan amount, if we cash out, would be greater than, so that comes first, minus our construction loan amount. In this case, there's 0, so there's no cash out. But in order to make creating the formulas easier, let's get into a situation where we would have a cash out. So all I have to do there is to increase the appraisal amount to, let's call it 650, optimistic. And so that means that we would take out $43,000. So we have to model that out. And modeling it out really is quite simple. Well, before that, we'll just indent this. Control Shift H or Alt H6 to indent that. And then essentially, whenever the month, we'll put this in parentheses, whenever the month is equal to the construction duration, which we'll fix with F4, then spit out this value right here. And we'll lock that column by clicking F4 3 times. And then we'll also lock this row by clicking F4 twice. By locking it in twice, clicking enter. And so there we have it. There we go. In month 12, we are done with construction. At the end of month 12, we're done with construction. At the start of month 13, we're doing operations, which means that the loan trades hands, though we pay off the loan in this month. And so because construction loans are interest-only loans, our loan amount, our loan principal started at $476,814, which is exactly what we see right here. Because there was no principal payoff, the loan amount at the start of construction was the same as the loan amount at the end of construction. And we pay it off with a bigger loan that we get from a different bank, the same bank or a different bank, but we pay off the previous loan is what you see going on here. But because we have a bigger loan, we're able to take that cash home with us. It's ultimately a liability because we're paying it down every month after, but we get to keep that cash today. And that's your cash out right here. And that's equal to this minus that. Bold it, Control C, Control V, and that's gonna be cash coming in the door, which is why we need to model it. Okay, so that is all good. Now we can copy, Control X this, Control X, Control V, and then we have our operating cash flows. Okay, beautiful. We can show what our why not? We'll show what our year one cash flow picture looks like. Year one, net operating income. This is just equal to what we got up here. And then our debt service is just equal to our monthly payment times 12. We're going to change the formatting of that to accounting by clicking Control Shift A, and we're going to make it negative. And then we're going to underline it by clicking Control U, and then Alt equals to take the sum, click Enter. And this is the total cash flow after financing we're going to get in year one. Now we did not copy this down, so just Shift, select all of that, Control X, move it down one. Beautiful. Bold that, and we are looking good. We get to see rent is increasing every month, or our cash flow is increasing every month because our debt service is staying the same, but our NOI is increasing. So that's really good. Last thing to do is calculate our disposition. So now for our disposition, we just take our unlevered proceeds from sale. And the only thing, so net unlevered proceeds from sale, which is our terminal value or our exit value, taking out our closing costs, and we get our net unlevered proceeds from sale. So we can just take equals this number right here from sale right there. And then the only thing we have to do is pay loan payoff. We have to pay off our loan because we're paying the loan down. We're paying down interest and principal every single month. But when we go to sell the property, we have to pay back the bank for the principal on the mortgage. And so we're going to model that out. So our unlevered proceeds from sale are just this entire row. So we can click Enter. So we can just take that from above, Control C, Control V, and then we get to see right here, this number is just being taken down right there. I don't love seeing these, so actually I will Control Space, Control Shift right arrow, and then Alt H-O-W, and then we'll make it, I think 10 is probably going to give it enough space. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so our disposition, the cash flows that happen in disposition are our net unlevered proceeds from sale. Now we just have to pay off the loan. So that happens with a very interesting formula. So we use a present value formula, click Tab. Our rate is our permanent financing interest rate right here, divided by 12. Now the most interesting part about this formula is the periods. So the amount of principal that we paid off, which is what this output will share, is like the amount of principal left on the loan, is relative to how many periods have already occurred. So up until this point, 36 periods have occurred. And so for this input, we want to show how many periods we have left until the loan needs to be due, which is equal to the term, which we're going to fix, minus the amount of periods that have elapsed. Then the payment is just this number right here. I'm going to fix that, close this, hit Enter, and then we're going to make this negative. Actually, no, you know what? It's fine if it shows up like that. I just want to make it, there we go. And then Alt H-O-W, make it 10, just like all the other ones. Perfect. So that is the amount of principal left due on the mortgage. Now, if I just Control C and Control V this, yep, it would show everywhere. So we only want to show this number if the number above it is greater than 0. And I didn't completely do that correctly. So we're doing the cell above is greater than 0 times the present value, hit Enter. So copy that over, and we have an error. Let's see why. Okay, I didn't fix the rates. That's very important. So over here, the interest rate, just hit F4 to fix it, hit enter, Control C, let's copy that across everything, and we get to see it's calculating. Now, to make sure that this is working correctly, I'm gonna make an amortization table to show you that this number is the amount of principal left for this loan in month 36, just to show you that this present value, because I know a lot of people will build out a full amortization table to find out how much loan needs to be paid off. But this formula does exactly that. But just to show you that it does work. In month 4, or if we sold in year 4, if we sold in year 5, there would be less principal left. So this number that comes after should be less than 502 if we change the hold period. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just put it to 4. Should be less than 502, and sure enough, it is $495,000. So in those first years of a mortgage, you're really not paying down that much principal, but there you get to see that it's actually working. Beautiful. So we'll just have this equal the sum of everything to the right. There we go. And then the sum, or the output of this, underline that. And then we have our net unlevered proceeds from sale minus our loan payoff, or there we go. That's how much cash flow we're left over with. We can just take the sum. So just alt equals, and then the net cash flow is equal to, actually we'll go ahead and bold this, Control B. And just so you guys can see what's going on here, we start with the sale, which occurs here. We pay off our closing costs, and we're left with our net unlevered proceeds from sale. Then in our levered cash flow, we pick up where we left off in the unlevered cash flow. We pay off our mortgage, and then this is the cash that we're left. So last thing to do is to calculate our net cash flow, and we're almost done. This is just equal to the negative investment cash flows, because that's cash out the door. And then we have plus our cash out, which is really a cash inflow. Then we have our cash flow after financing, and then we have our net levered proceeds from sale. Hit enter, Control C, copy that all the way over, and then we do have to modify that formula just a little bit after I type in here, net levered proceeds from sale. Bold that, bold all of this. And just like we had this problem before, we're showing cash flow after we sell the property, which is going to mess up our financial returns. And so we want to we'll rewrite that formula right over here. So if the month is, we'll do the year. If the year is less than or equal to the hold period, which we'll fix there, then spit off all of that, but we'll put it on parentheses so that order of operations works. Control C, Control Shift right arrow, Control V, and sure enough, it works. So right here, we have the last thing. Our cash flow from operations is adding to this, and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. From there, we can select all of this, right arrow, all HBS, okay. And then I will also go to view. I'll remove grid lines, just gives a cleaner look. All right, and we're almost done. Now we just have to calculate our returns. But before then, I just want to make sure I'm calculating everything here on the left-hand side congruently. So I think this would just look better if I aligned it to the right. So I'll do Alt HAR to align it to the right. Perfect. And then green cells are in fact, yep, that is taking a difference there. That's taking the difference there. That's taking the difference there. Perfect. This is taking the sum. I just want to make sure that these cells aren't taking the sum of everything to the right. Okay, good. This needs to be bolded. Bold, bold, bold. Everything's underlined. Okay, could underline this. Nope, not bold, underline. I don't love that look. We'll unbold that. Okay, it looks good. Looks good, looks good. I'll just turn this into an accounting and I'll make it negative. That looks right. I like seeing it red. There we go. All right, so now let's do our returns. So we'll start with our unlevered returns. And last thing I'll do is just make sure our unlevered cash flow is calculating correctly. So it's taking the negative investment cash flows, it's adding the operating cash flows, and then adding the operating cash flow to the exit. Perfect. Okay, that's why we do our double check, because this is not calculating correctly. And it's not calculating correctly because I changed this number right here. So this number was showing positive. So we'll just keep it positive since our formulas are already there, which means that our debt service payments are showing up as negative, which means that our loan payoff is showing up as negative. There we go. That's good. That's good. Let's check one more thing. Make sure that if I move this to 2, everything shifts over appropriately. operating for a full year and then paying off the mortgage right here. Let's turn, and there we go. Things look good. So we'll do our unlevered returns first. Our IRR is taken by using the XIRR function. And to learn more about IRR, I would recommend watching a YouTube video about it. But it essentially, so you're trying to compare like a real estate investment to like stocks. But in a stock, you don't have, thousands of dollars leaving your bank account before you make tiny upticks in cash. And then you have like one big like cash inflow. And so while IRR isn't an average, it's absolutely not an average. You're gonna get people upset thinking about that. And I'm so incorrect for calling it an average, but it's like, it kind of makes comparing a real estate investment kind of similar to comparing it to like an equity investment, like a security, like a stock. But there's like some math that goes behind into it, but that's why I recommend watching a YouTube video about it. So you do XIRR and you select your values. So Control-Shift right arrow, and then you select your dates, which are right above. You click enter, and there you have your IRR. Control-Shift 5 to make it a percentage, Control-Alt right arrow, and then we will Alt-HHN to get rid of that, and then we'll Control-Shift-K to make it black. Our equity multiple is essentially all the positive cash flows, the sum of all the positive cash flows, divided by the sum of all the negative cash flows. And so let's build this formula in parts. So we do equals sum if, and we'll select this whole range. And the criteria is that we'll only sum it if it's greater than 0, like that, in quotation marks, if it's greater than 0. Close it, equals, and there you go. That's the sum of all the positive cash flows, which essentially start right here and end right here. So the sum, $690,744, is equal to this right here. Beautiful. Then we divide that by the negative sum if of this whole range, but all the values that are less than 0, all the negative values. And we put this negative here because we want our equity multiple to show up as a positive number. And so if we take a sum of all the negative cash flows, which is essentially all of these values right here, then it would make the equity multiple negative. So we just click enter, and we get to see here that our equity multiple is 1.3. So an equity multiple of 1 is essentially that you put in $1 into the deal and then you got a single dollar back. So an equity multiple of 1 is like, what are we doing? Like, we wasted our time. An equity multiple of 1.3 means that for every $1 you put in the deal, you got $1.3 back, $1.30 back. That's what equity multiple shows you. So but the thing about equity multiple is that it doesn't take into account the time value of money, because I could have gotten $1.3 back for every $1 I put in 1 million years from now. The way that equity multiple is calculated is I still would have had an equity multiple of 1.3. Versus if my hold period was like 10 million years, my IRR would be like essentially 0, because IRR takes into account the time value of money. If you return the dollars quicker, your IRR will increase. Okay, so now we'll do that at the end. And then profit is just equal to the sum of all the cash flows. So select all that, hit enter, and then that is all the profit. You put in all the money. This is the difference between all the positive cash flows and the negative cash flows. So Alt-HHN to get rid of that, Control-Shift-K, and those are your risk and return metrics for your unlevered cash flow. Now let's do our levered return. So I'm just gonna get rid of this to not make it distracting, and then I'm gonna make it black already. So our cash on cash return is our cash flow, our year one's cash flow after financing divided by all the cash that we put into the deal. So essentially cash on cash. How much cash are you bringing in after relative to how much cash you put in the deal? Hit enter, that's your cash on cash return. Click Control-Shift-5 to turn into a percentage, Control-Alt right arrow to give us more decimals, and that is your cash on cash return. That is a really good cash on cash return. Then your DSCR. This is equal to your NOI divided by your debt service in year one. Hit enter, and we'll make this negative because we want our DSCR to show up as positive. And there you go. Your DSCR is 1.59. Now, if your DSCR is 1, that means you're paying as much in debt as your operating income. So you're bringing in $0 home, which is a terrible investment, which is why DSCR is so important. You want to be able to see your DSCR before you make your investment. Next thing is our IRR. So we calculate the IRR the same way. I'm just going to copy this function, Control C, but I'm going to fix that. Control C, Control V, and then I'm just going to drag this down over here, hit enter, and holy moly, that is huge IRR. That's why we love these deals. Then we're going to do our equity multiple, which is just copying the same formula, all HVF. Now we have to move around some things. I'll just drag this down, hit enter. You can see the IRR or the equity multiple for the unlevered returns, it like matters, but what really hits your bank account is your levered equity multiple, because this is comparing the actual cash that hits your pocket because you paid all your debt, you paid all your expenses, you paid off the loan, compared to or relative to the actual cash that you put in the deal, which is right here, your equity required, your equity investment. So what this is telling you is that in 2 years of making this investment, you 3.23x your capital. And then your profit is equal to the sum of all the cash flows. So this essentially tells you on your $58,000 cash investment, you profited on top of that $131,000. So not including, that's after paying off your initial investment. That's profit. There you go. And with that, that is the complete financial model. Now that you've completely built it out yourself, you have like a next level of understanding of how numbers flow in these deals. You can mess around with the different assumptions and see directly what it does to your returns. And I think the last thing I'll do is just to build out an amortization table to show you guys that this payoff actually is like the principal left on this loan is actually that in month 24. So let's go ahead and do that. Call this amortization table. This is starting period. All right, so to make this amortization table, we'll need a couple of things. We'll need the loan amount, periods, the payment. So let's bring all those things over. Alt HOI, loan amount equals the loan amount. Make that green. The periods equals 360 months. Payment, there we go. And then the interest rate. We don't really need the interest rate. Yeah, we don't need it. Actually, we do. Equals, all right. All right, so to make an amortization, we got beginning balance, ending balance, plus period. Period is just equal to 0, and then equals this plus 1. Copy that down all the way to 360. Hey, I was pretty close there. 360. The beginning balance is equal to the loan amount, the interest, principal, the payment, and the ending balance. We'll just give it more space, Alt HOI, boom. Okay, so we start like this. This is just all 0. I'll make all this the accounting format we like. Perfect. Beginning balance equals the ending balance. Interest equals this times interest rate divided by 12. And we will fix the interest rate by hitting F4. The payment is equal to the payment. And I will just Control Shift A. Perfect. And then the principal is just the difference between these two. So payment minus interest equals the amount of principal that's being paid down. And so the ending balance is equal to the beginning balance minus the principal. Perfect. And then the beginning balance is just the ending balance. And then we can copy this down. This can be copied down. This can be copied down. And this can be copied down until something breaks. So let's see. Payment. This needs to be fixed. So hit F4, Control C, Control V, and then we can select this whole row, bring it down 360 periods, and then the ending balance on the last period should be 0. There we go. So we're calculating things correctly. I'm going to select all this, Control Shift A to give it format we like. And then to verify that our payoff calculation was working correctly right here is we'll just go to period 24 and see what the principal is. Period 24, the principal $508,530 which is equal to this. So you can build a whole amortization table, or you can just use this formula, which is why I like this formula so much. That is the end of building the short-term rental development financial model. There is so much that we covered today, and you guys followed along with every step. So give yourself a pat on the back, and we will see you in the next video.